I'm Charlotte. I'm Charlotte So Natural in Newton, Kansas, and I wanted to touch base with you on how to do a Y seam. Now don't turn it off right away. Go ahead, bear with me, because really and truly Y seams are not that hard. I am working on this quilt, and I introduced this a little bit ago on how this is a Lone Star, and I did it with strips. The pattern says to cut lots of diamonds, but I decided that I knew how to do it with strips, and you can Google that, Jelly Roll Lone Star, and come up with several different really nice videos produced by different people on how to do that. So then after she has you piecing this, she tells you how to avoid sewing a Y seam, which is all well and good, except that by the time you've done all this, really and truly, you have the skills to do a Y seam. So I want to show you that, particularly because I did not want seams in my background, because I decided that I don't want to do this applique. And I'm going to have a machine quilter do a custom motif in there, so I don't want a seam, which is what you have to do if you're trying to avoid sewing into this corner. You need to have a seam going that whole direction. So I just want to show you how easy this is. Once you have this pieced, you can figure out what this dimension needs to be by measuring your piecing. So your piecing, in this case my piecing, it is 2 1/8. So from here to here is 2 1/8, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times 2 1/8 is 12 3/4. So then I need a 1/4 inch here, that takes it to 13. I need a 1/4 inch here, that takes it to 13 1/4. So here is what I want to put in there. And I am just going to comment here real quick. This started out as a square, and then I'm going to cut it in half, but that's going to make this bias edge. So I folded it in half, pressed it, and then I stay stitched. I just stitched, before I cut it, I stitched a 1/4 inch on both sides of that pressed fold, and then I cut it apart. So now this is stitched. This is not going to distort too much before I get that all sewn together. And you can see that's going to be the outside edge of this center of the quilt. It's getting a border on it, so I have pieced that border too. But I just want you to see that this is a triangle, and at the moment this is a straight edge and this is a bias edge. So I know I need 12 3/4 plus a 1/4, 13, 13 1/4, and I'm going to start a 1/4 inch back from here. So this is, here's my 1/4 inch, and here is my 12 3/4, 13, that's the 12 3/4 plus a 1/4, and then there's my outside edge. So those are my lines. Now I'm going to make sure that I know what that intersection is, because that's what's really important. So the intersection there is, now I've got my 1/4 inch line lined up on the edge of my fabric, and I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to draw a line here. So these are my intersections, right there and right there. So that's where I want to start and stop sewing. I don't want to sew into here. I am not going to sew into this area. I'm going to start and stop at my intersection. So I've got that pin for you, because that's going to go right in there. And actually, because I'm sewing it over here, you can go ahead right now and mark that. So again, that is, so there's my 1/4 inch. There's my 1/4 inch laid on the edge. So there's my first intersection. Here's my second one. I need 12 3/4 plus a 1/4 is 13. So there we are. So that's where it's going to be. It's going to go, that piece will be a 1/4 beyond, so that's my marker. So there we go. So now I have gone ahead and I have pinned this so that, well, let me just show you how I pin it. So when I sewed this together, I did the same thing. I marked, and maybe, I don't know if you can see it, but I have a white mark there. That was so that I didn't sew beyond that. So there is my sewing stopping right there. And now what I'm going to do is match up this piece. Oops, let's see. There's my mark. I'm going to match up that piece right there. And you can kind of see there, can you see it through the fabric? There's the wrong side of the fabric. I'm marking that right there, and then I'm going to take a pin, and that goes right there. You can see that matches. Then I'm going to take this one. Now this is actually a straight edge. The bias edges are sewn together on these diamonds, so that's a straight edge. So I don't really have too much work to do, but there again, can you see I'm going to match that right to that, and that is 1/4 of an inch down, and I am going to stitch again from my previous stitching line right there. I'm not going to sew into the seam allowance. And now I'm going to make sure that's all flat. I'm going to pin that really well. And now I'll show you on the one I already pinned over here. So Kristen, if you want to come around over on this side, this might be. It doesn't hurt to have a little ruler to double check, make sure you've got everything right. So now, got my 1/4 inch foot. And I'm just going to push this back here. I can see right where that stitching ends. It's right there. Go ahead, do it in a contrasting color. Makes it so much easier to see. And then I just walk that down right into my place. And you can see that's a perfect 1/4 inch. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on. And I'm going to take 2 stitches. Then I'm going to bring my needle up. I'm going to just lift my foot a little bit. I'm going to go back. I'm not going to do the reverse on the sewing machine because I want to really control this. So all I've done really is I'm taking sort of just a little anchor stitch. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I actually shorten my stitch length and I don't bother with that anchor stitch. I just start with really small stitches. The anchor stitch gives you a little bit more forgiveness. Like if it isn't stitched exactly how you want to, it's very easy to cut and pull out. So I'm just going to stitch that. I'm stitching very carefully to make sure my seam allowances stay where they are. Now you can see I'm coming to the corner. I'm just going to push this back. My thread, I've left a little bit of thread there, so that's very clear to me, even with my need stronger glasses situation. I'm going to lift the presser foot a little bit, lift that pin out of there. 1, 2, and there it goes. Came right into the end. Now I don't know if you can quite see it, but really right there is this thread coming right up from the previous line, and I don't want anything to go any further, so I'm going to walk that up. Now I'm going to lift up my foot again. I'm going to walk it back, and I'm going to take 2 little anchor stitches right in that seam, but not at the intersection itself, and that's going to hold that thread tight. So I'm going to pull that off. Now I can easily, here is my other side that I marked, and now you can see how this is going to just come right up. This is going to be flat on the bed of the sewing machine. It's just a flat square. And now I can easily bring this around, and I will be able to sew from that exact place that I left off on the other machine. Everything is flat back behind here. I'm just going to push those seam allowances gently out of the way, and I'll be able to start again right from that other place. Now, I would not do that without coming and pinning all of this. I want to make sure that this is exactly where it's supposed to be. Again, this has to be right exactly there when I come to the end of stitching. So I would be pinning all of this, and I would be doing it on my flat table because that's how I am. But you can see how nicely that is going to line up. And we can just put some pins in here. But really and truly, I'm not going to have any difficulty getting that to go in. So, oops. So I want to make sure that this doesn't have a bubble in it, that this is all smooth and flat. So I will probably, before I start sewing this, when we get off camera, I'm going to take this out and make sure this is all smooth so that when it comes out, I know that I have a really nice corner like that. And on this side, this is what it looks like. After it's pressed, everything is open underneath. I've left these kind of long pieces, and that is all very nice and smooth and flat. So I hope that that gives you the courage to try a Y seam on your own. Really and truly, it is not difficult, so put that out of your mind. It just takes a little bit of marking and a little bit of slow sewing. So thanks for joining me. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.